I think we are ready to begin. So wanted to welcome everybody to this webinar where we're going to be discussing transitioning from Sage 300 CRE to Sage Intacct Construction. My name is Nick Brorson. I just had a couple of slides I wanted to take us through as we're sort of framing up the presentation today. And Eric, if you could just let me know if you're able to get in, maybe message Jeff so we can ensure we're getting through these slides okay. So just a little bit about Sockeye for those of you who don't know us. So Sockeye has been around since 2007. We are a premier Sage Intacct Construction partner. We've actually implemented more Sage Intacct Construction than any other partner within the Sage ecosystem. And we're just seeing a tremendous amount of excitement and really customers adopting this product at a pretty rapid rate. One of the unique ways that we help our customers be successful is through a model that is this continuous improvement sort of cycle, meaning we're helping people move from Sage 300, migrate their data, train them appropriately, and really we have a cycle of continuous improvement that allows us to really help our customers get the most value they can out of the software. I see we have a number of folks here that are Skyline, historically Skyline customers, now Sockeye customers. Welcome, we're excited to have you here. We're really excited to be able to show you guys today some of the key areas that we think really enhance and differentiate this product from the Sage 300 CRE product. Some of you have been on previous webinars we've done, and there were things such as the property management module that wasn't quite there yet. We now have that as part of the package, as well as the Sage Intacct Construction Payroll being released as well. So a lot of very exciting developments and areas that we definitely want to highlight today. So just a little bit about where Sage is positioned, the Sage Intacct product. Obviously, this is really focused on for those companies that have been on Sage 300 CRE. That product is, there's been no announcement from Sage of sunsetting that product. However, they are incentivizing customers pretty significantly to evaluate and look at moving to Sage Intacct Construction. And when you start to see some of the capabilities that, previously we were having to, do things like use a lot of third parties like an Office connector or, different tools to be able to accomplish some of our reporting capabilities. Those are tools we actually have sort of built into the Sage Intacct Construction platform. So as we're taking a look at this today, I'd encourage you, as Eric gets into the demo, please feel free to ask questions. We want to make sure we're able to answer any of those questions, as well as be able to, dig a little bit deeper, sort of a few layers deeper to be able to help you understand sort of the capabilities of maybe what you currently have versus what Intacct's going to be able to deliver for you. So a little bit about additionally about Sage Intacct. So it is actually the only only ERP system on the market that's designated as a preferred provider by the AICPA. So they've made that endorsement. It's the only actual accounting package on the market that carries that endorsement, which is a big deal. G2 Crowd, which is sort of a consumer reports for business software, has ranked it as the #1 application for customer satisfaction for a number of years in a row. And then likewise, it's been listed as a visionary within the Gartner's analysis. And what all of this sort of means is sort of your peers, professional associations, as well as industry analysts have ranked this at the very top of the ERP paradigm. Likewise, there's some things that are built into Intacct that I think are pretty significant and help construction companies sort of get more value out of their core ERP. So we do have very extensive workflow capabilities that are brought into this product. Being able to, previously we were having to use third-party software to be able to achieve some of this. We actually have a lot of workflow and a lot of capabilities built directly into Intacct's platform itself. Additionally, integration capabilities. So in Intacct, we have a fully exposed API, allowing us to connect into other best-in-class solutions like your Procores, like an ADP, like HH2, those systems that you've grown to use in the past. And then, of course, visibility, one of the key drivers most companies as they're evaluating ERP or accounting system replacements. They're really looking in terms of what can I get? Can I get better reporting out of the system? Can I, do things like automate some of our WIP reporting to make, those sort of really time-consuming and time-sensitive tasks a lot more automated. So I wanted to just add this slide briefly to be able to show you what some of the partners that have already developed solutions for Intacct look like. So, I know a lot of you are using HH2. They're still one of our best partners. They have created their product to be fully integrated with Sage Intacct. Obviously, Procore we touched on. Procore is actually stated this is going to be the deepest integration they have with any ERP package because the technology is facilitating that on the Intacct side. So there's a lot of really exciting partnerships. And then, of course, there's actually beyond just, these names that you might recognize in the historical Sage channel, we also have literally hundreds of other solutions in our marketplace that help us really enhance and further enhance the solution in a number of different verticals, from project management to payroll to HR capabilities.
All right, so you should be able to see my screen right now looking at Sage Intacct, and Nick talked a lot about the overview and the direction, and I'm going to show you what Sage Intacct looks like today, as well as highlighting some of the differences in helping transition from a 300 platform to Sage Intacct. So one of the first things you'll notice is the user interface is pretty modern and allows for a lot of intuitive use. So right now you can see I'm at the top level of my entities. If I click on that drop down there, you'll see a list of entities. And if I were to click on one of those entities, it's going to open up a tab where on this tab, I'm working in just that one entity. Now you'll notice the difference when I click on this first tab again, I'm at what's called the top level. And that just highlights the single platform for multiple entities. The Sage Intacct is all the time is consolidating. There's no separate reporting database. So every time we're looking at this top level, we're looking at a consolidated financials. And what that means in terms of the use and the transition into Intacct is you need to prepare in a method if you've had separate files for your different entities, and now they're going to be in one. So what's helpful is a similar chart of accounts or the same chart of accounts for all entities, looking at things like what information do we want shared between our entities. So we might have lists like our customer database and our vendor database shared between the entities. So with that planning then helps you streamline and take advantage of the Intacct capabilities of using it in a multi-entity environment. What comes out from that is you can also enter in transactions across multiple entities. All the due to, due from accounts are going to get hit automatically, and Intacct will keep track of that accounting for you. All right, so moving on down the window, you can see this dashboard, and we can have as many different dashboards as you want. Now, dashboard is a collection of information and reports that you have in the system. So another thing when you think about transitioning from a legacy system into a modern system like Sage Intacct is what are the dashboards that I would want to see? What type of information do I want to consolidate into one view to be able to either see it comparatively or to be able to see that information at the same time and then drill down or take action on it? So as an example, you can see I have some graphs and some reports in this dashboard, as well as some what we call performance cards or information that we want to keep track on. And we can drill down on any of this data. So if I want to look at, for example, my project profit margin, I can click on that dollar value. And when I do, I'm going to see what that profit margin is made up of. It's made up of revenue and several different types of costs. And each one of those costs I can drill down on again and see information of the individual transactions that make up that cost. Now, Intacct has the ability to provide us that information and then allow us to customize what we see right on the fly.
Eric, a question came in. Does that drill back all the way to the subledger, and can you see attachments associated with those?
Right. Yes, you can. So I drilled down on the labor line item here, so I can keep drilling back. It's going to bring me to where that shows up in my general ledger on first drilling down, and tells me it's made up of time entries from this pay period. I can drill down on those time entries and I can see the 3 employees that had time entries in that pay period, and then actually view those time sheets. So by clicking on view here, I'm going to see Gregory's timesheet. I would be able to see, I can see in this state it's approved. I would be able to see who approved it and all those details. So I can see the timesheet, Gregory's timesheet, how that time is broken down, if it was regular time or overtime, all those details. If Gregory had notes on his Monday time entry, double click on it and I would see the description or notes that he has entered, the state of that time entry. And these can also can pull onto the invoices then when I go to bill this time entry.
Great.
You mentioned attachments too, Nick, and you can see here that I have the ability to do attachments. I can even come into edit mode here of this time entry. And if I wanted to upload a new attachment into this timesheet, if I were to click on the paperclip, if there's a timesheet in there, I would see those details. So if we have a paper signature or something that we need to upload, we could do that as well. All right. I'm going to go back to this previous report here. And these reports and these drill down reports can be customized as well. So you can see, I see employee name and the vendor name and the item. If I click on this customize button, it's real simple to say, what do I want to look at? And I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom of the window and you can see those fields of what's on the date on that report. And I can click on add and edit and remove. Maybe I don't need that item ID field on there, or maybe I wanted some other information like the department. I can add that department on there. Save view, and it will refresh that drill down report on with my changes. All right. And that was drilling down on these performance cards. We can drill down on the reports and get the same experience. But as long as I'm talking about these performance cards, you can see that we have some performance cards as pulling information from a financial ledger, from a statistical ledger, the number of jobs that we have that we're actively working on. And we can also do calculations. So either based off the statistics or based off of financial information. All right, I'm going to jump back up here just a little bit above those performance cards and show you can have as many different dashboards you want. So you can have different purposes for dashboard. You might have your daily dashboard or your month-end dashboard or your after payroll dashboard, and they could have different things on them. You can also have filters on your dashboard. So you don't need to have a dashboard for project A and a separate dashboard for project B. You can actually just create one dashboard and use the filters to really slice that data. So you can see I have a date range here that I'm looking at, or as of date that I'm looking at. If I want to change that date and regenerate the dashboard, I can simply click on the applied changes and it will change all of the reports based off of the new date that I've entered. So you can see how quickly those reports refreshed here. We often get the question about working in the cloud, but it is a really snappy interface and we can relay that information quickly. We can also add filters to this dashboard. So here I have a location filter where I might be looking at individual entities or locations. I'm going to skip over to this job filter here and show that if I click on this drop down here, I can see, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. I can see individual jobs or groups of jobs. So I can look at an individual crew, for example, if I wanted to, or individual types of jobs. So I can use the fields on the job setup to group jobs together, filter jobs, and then report on that. So if I click on my hotel jobs and then apply that filter, it will regenerate my dashboard as of this date for my jobs that are hotel jobs. Okay. So just like we drilled down on those performance cards, we can also drill down on the graphs and reports. So here I have a report that, or a graph that's showing my actual project expenses versus my budget. And the lime green color as a project progresses will fill up the teal color. So I know many of you provide reports to your project managers of where things are at the budget level. And this allows the project manager to come in, see their jobs, and be able to take action on those in real time. All right. Likewise, I can drill down on those dollar values and get the same functionality of reporting that we already looked at. Okay, I'm going to take a look at one more item on this dashboard, and this is a report. So we've talked about the cards, the graphs, and now we have a report. And these reports can be viewed independently of a dashboard or included right into your dashboard. So one big change of moving from a legacy-based system that has text-based reporting, where you would print a report and maybe, or generate a report and maybe you would print it, or maybe you would send it to a PDF and send it out, or maybe you send it to Excel and then do your calculations in Excel. Intacct takes a different approach where the reporting itself is interactive and we can do our calculations directly in it. So it's interactive because we can drill down on that information. So on these projects, if I wanted to see some information on project setup, I could simply click on the project name and it would bring me to the window with all the details of that project configuration. Likewise, any of these blue text fields, these blue dollar amounts, I can drill down to the source transactions. So looking at the schedule of values of contract amount, I should point out as well at this point that these reports I have configured to pull these certain columns, and you can configure columns to be different, or maybe you want to exclude columns that are in my report, and that's real easy to do as well. So I have the contract amount. In my case, these are the original contract amount, but you might want to see what's the outstanding contract amount to look at your backlog there. Again, drilling down is going to bring me back to that schedule of values. Drilling down on the project estimate is going to bring me to that estimate. Likewise, we talked about the contract amounts. The estimates could be the original estimates or cost at completion estimates, or you could build both on the same report. We have some calculations, and then we jump into the actual transactions that have taken place. So one of the things that Sage Intacct has is the ability to handle purchase orders that flow right into invoices, and as well as subcontract agreements that flow right into invoices or convert to invoices. And because we have those subcontract agreements and purchase orders, we can keep track of open commitments. Open commitments are viewable too, just by drilling down. So if I drill down on a dollar value, I'll have open commitments, whether those are material purchase orders or subcontract agreements. Okay, drilling down on a subcontract agreement will again bring me to those details of that subcontract agreement, and then continuing on to the list of subcontracts there, and then the subcontract agreement itself. With all of the coding that's listed in the subcontract agreement. Okay, right from my more actions button on top, I could convert this subcontract agreement right to an invoice if I wanted to. So that's one way we can move those transactions through the system, or copy it to a new transaction, or issue a change order on that subcontract agreement. I also have the ability to see the audit trail and of how this if there's any changes made on this transaction as well. Right in the purchase order itself, I can see the history of the transaction, if there's been any invoices that have been converted from the subcontract agreement, and any change orders that have been processed as well. Right. So that was the commitments. We can obviously see the total billed amounts as well, and look at those owner invoices and any costs that have been incurred in the transaction.
Eric, there's a question about who sets up these reports. Is this something that an end user sets up? Is this something that Sockeye sets up?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes. Both are true. During implementation, we will identify the reports that you need and set those up and work with you to validate and refine those reports as needed. But also the reporting is very simple. So we train users how to create those reports, or to make copies of them and make different iterations of them. But as a long-term relationship with our customers, we continue to help the customers refine and retune their those reports.
And I think that's where, one of the things we're finding with a lot of customers is being able to, since we work with, hundreds of companies and have seen a lot of different sort of effective reporting capabilities, we try to take what we're learning from, different reports that we've generated and be able to pass those on to other customers where appropriate. So a lot of what you're seeing in terms of like what Eric's going to be demoing today are really just, these are reports that Eric generated for the purpose of, this presentation. And we have an pretty extensive amount of capabilities to modify those and create new ones. The other part is you can see all this reporting we're actually doing right within the accounting system, which maybe is something we shouldn't gloss over quite as quickly, because we do have the capabilities here to basically do all of the reporting without having to jump into Excel or Crystal reports or these different tools to get the data out.
Yeah, good point. I'll show too on this column, this committed and spend, you can see I have different colors based off of different dollar thresholds, and that's pretty easy to do as well. In fact, I dare to say that's easier to do in Intacct than it is to do in Excel. And just to give an example, I can click on the pencil of this report, and as long as I have the security access to make changes to a report, I can come in and say, I want to look at the columns of the report. And here you can see really simply that I have actual amounts, I have budget amounts, and then I can look at which information I want on the reports. So if I scroll down here on the conditional highlighting, this is one that is highlighted, you can set up the rules of how things should be highlighted. If it's greater than 100%, then make it red. If it's greater than 80%, make it yellow. So this would be greater than 80%, less than 100%. And then if it's less than 10%, make it blue. So you can set up all of the rules that make sense to you and reflect that in the report. All right. I'm going to show one more report on this dashboard, and this is a project profitability report where we're looking at each project is its own column. And on the left-hand side, the rows that pull the information is really just my chart of accounts. So I want to highlight this because it does display a way of pivoting your information, both the way you think about it and the data itself, when moving from a legacy system into Intacct. Now we're going to take a look at what this report looks like in the setup. So bear in mind, it's a P&L report by job. The one underneath it, the report underneath is the same report, but by customer instead of job. So I'll click on this pencil here for the reporting changes, and I'll click on columns. Now this report only has two columns. The first column is the account number and name, and the second column is an actual amount. So instead of actuals, I could do forecasts or budgets or calculations. The date that it's pulling is the job inception to date. And then I'm expanding the columns by job. So that's why we see one column for every job. You can see the icon listed up here to display that. But to do a different report pivoted on another field is really simple. So if I wanted to see each location as its own column, I would select that. Each department as its own column, I would select that. And just by clicking that option and saying preview, it's going to regenerate my report, in this case, by department, and I haven't tagged the individual departments here, but it's the same report, just broken down differently by what I've selected on that expand by field. All right. So that's some of the information from the dashboard, again, allowing those drill downs right from the dashboard to that source transactions on any one of these reports. I'm going to jump over now to the purchasing area of Intacct and display another configuration, a way that Intacct gives you the power to configure your system. So in Intacct, we have the ability to do purchase orders and subcontract agreements, any commitments, like I mentioned earlier. Now, this is an example workflow where we're taking a purchase requisition, and that purchase requisition then can get turned into a purchase order. But at that point, I branch out into 4 different types of commitments, not just purchase orders. It can be branched off to a purchase order for a job, a subcontract agreement, purchase order for inventory, or possibly a change order for one of these other document types. And this is, again, configured for every company of how we want the system to process or how we want it to work. Now, the reason why you might have different types of transactions here, it can vary, but one might be you have different approval methods if inventory or if items are on a purchase order for inventory versus if they're for a job. Or you might have fields that you want to capture if it's a subcontract commitment, fields like my insurance and bonding information. So this is all flexible and defined by every organization, how they want their workflow to go. We'll just jump into creating a purchase order and see how a transactional window looks in Intacct. The data entry screen is very familiar if you're used to web-based applications, and very intuitive. So as I go to the vendor field, if I don't know my vendor ID, I can just start typing a vendor name, and it will start filtering that vendor list. Now I can use my mouse and select one if I want, or I can continue typing until the one I want is on top and then just tap off. Bear in mind what I said at the beginning of this presentation, we can set up the system to have one set of vendors for all organizations, so that when we change vendor addresses and payment information, it's changed in one place. We can also filter our vendors based off of which entities should be able to use that vendor. We can tag a job at the header of the purchase order if all this entire purchase order should be for one job, or we can specify it in the lines below if there might be multiple jobs that we're hitting from this transaction. All right. So I'll go ahead and select like I'm coding a purchase order here. So I'll select an example project and a cost type. Now my cost type, I want to do a cost code first. And I should point out here that my cost codes and cost types, I typically would do my cost code first before my cost type. So if I want to make changes to that, I can come up into Intacct and edit my layout. Now this is just handled by security. So if I wanted my cost code to come first, I can move that cost code first. You can see other windows or other fields that popped up that allow me to make changes as well. So now that I've selected that, my cost code, I can click on this cost type here, and I can see that I don't have any cost types associated with this cost code. Right on the fly, I can make changes to that. So I can click on add, and I have a list of standard cost types. So this is things like materials, subcontract, labor, equipment. Maybe you specify whether the equipment is owned or rented. You could do that as well. I've added now this cost type to that cost code. And I can finish filling out this purchase order here. You can see I also have the ability to track retainage and calculate that retainage, keep a ledger of that retainage. Now I skipped over this Spend Insights button, and what Spend Insights is going to do is give me, the person that's entering the transaction, as well as any approver or reviewer of the transaction, the idea of how much was allocated for this job and cost code and cost type combination. So in this case, I didn't allocate any budget for this combination. I have not made any purchases. There's no actual expenses or commitments to this. If there were, I could click on that drill down and see a list of those. This purchase is $120 and I don't have a budget. And what happens next is all up to you as an organization. Do I let this transaction continue even though there's no budget? Do I need to email and notify the budget administrator maybe, or let them know that it's going over budget, the project manager? Or do I just warn the user and let them continue? You'll see the submit button up on top. And that would be when I'm ready to submit this transaction for approval, I can click that and it would go through the approval workflow. Approvals can be done based off of the jobs or the departments or the dollar values of different thresholds. So we have a flexible approval workflow for moving transactions through the system. Okay, draft is going to allow me to save this transaction, and it tells me I have a rule set up that I have violated. So Intacct gives you the flexibility of setting up rules of data entry so that you can check the transactions before they're submitted. Okay.
Eric, could you talk a little bit about the AP line retainage and how that's automated a bit?
Yes, thanks. So if I come onto my accounts payable here, you can see my accounts payable workflow. Well, in both accounts payable and accounts receivable, we have a retainage ledger that we keep. And that retainage ledger is going to show me everything that has been retained and has not been released. So if I click on add here, I'll see a list of transactions that have retainage on them. So here's individual transactions, in this case, AP transactions, my original amount, the amount retained, and the amount released of that retainage. And if I want to, when I'm ready to release retainage on any invoice, I can select the ones that I want to release, add those to my release schedule. And then I can specify how much I want to release, either by dollar value or by percentage. So I can say I want to release retainage, say 35% of the retainage, and it will go through and calculate 35% of the retainage in each of these lines. Now, the reason why that's powerful is because, well, it used to be a reconciliation project of how are we doing on retainage. Now it just becomes a process of notifying the system when we're ready to release it. When I release it, then there's a transaction in accounts payable, in this case, that I can cut a payment against any one of these vendors.
Great, thank you. And then another just big differentiator between 300 and Sage Intacct is your flexibility on your cost code structures. Could you talk maybe a little bit about that?
Great, yeah. So in the cost code structures in Intacct, you have the ability to set up a standardized set of cost code for a cost code catalog. And you have multiple options, sets of cost codes you can set up. So I have a set of cost codes here, in this case, set of developer cost codes. We can have a hierarchy set up of those, and we can go as many levels deep as we want. In this case, I have 3 levels deep in my hierarchy of cost codes. I can also set up other sets of cost codes. So I have a set, I call my residential cost codes and my R cost codes that I've got here that are a different set. So when I go to create a job, I can specify which set of cost codes I want to use. Now, this is really valuable if you have a set of customers that have their cost codes predefined for you. Like we work with companies that have Department of Labor or Department of Transportation cost codes that are specified, and they need to use that set when they work on the system or they do a job for them. So you can set up those cost codes and assign them to job as you move along. You can also specify a custom set of cost codes. So if you have a unique job and you don't want to use the standard set, the standard catalog, you can create a cost code structure for one specific job if you choose to do that as well.
And it looks like those can go multiple layers deep.
So this is 3 layers deep, and jobs work the same way. We can have multiple hierarchies within a job as well as within a cost code. So let's take a look at that. So here we have a job that has 4 layers deep. So in this case, we have a specific location in this subdivision, individual lots, and then those lots are broken up into individual phases. Now, even in those phases, maybe I have a separate job or sub job for a specific change order, and I wanted to call that out. I can do that as well. So I know in 300, you can only use your job and extras for the job. In Intacct, you can go as deep as you want in that hierarchy.
Great, thank you.
So
I have just a couple more minutes left here, Eric, if you could maybe just hit on any of the other items you want to touch on before we
Yeah,
wrap?
I wanted to specify in cash management too. One of the advantages of being in the cloud is the ability to take into account technology that's built even beyond just the accounting software. So as technology evolves, we can take advantage of that with a cloud-based system instead of waiting for it to be coded into an on-premise system. So this example, I have a checking account. If I click on edit of my checking account, we have what's called banking cloud. And in the banking cloud, we can connect to individual banks and download transactions as they clear the bank. So right now, Intacct connects to over 6,500 banks across the United States and beyond the United States as well. When I've selected the bank, I'll log into the bank one time and it will save that tunnel or that connection to the bank. And then every 4 hours, Intact's going to download new transactions that have cleared the bank and try to match those up with transactions that are inside of Intacct already. That means that when you go to reconcile your checkbook, you're putting in things like the statement ending balance and the statement date. Most of the transactions can be matched up for you, and then you're just dealing with the outliers that it couldn't find a match for. In the case that those are not in Intacct, like maybe it's a bank fee or an interest fee, interest income, you can click on those transactions, specify what type of transaction it is, such as a fee or interest transaction. And then you would just code it and it would record those transactions, that transaction, and match it up for you. It already has downloaded information from the bank to specify the amount and the date and some details. So you're just giving it a general ledger code. It really helps streamline that data. Also, Intacct allows for learning of new system, learning of how you use the system. So if I come into my general ledger journal entries as an example, we have what's called an outlier detection. So outlier detection, what that does is as you're posting transactions, Intacct is learning about how you process information. What accounts do you typically use, and what sort of dollar amounts do you hit those accounts with? As you go throughout your use of Intacct, then outliers start to surface. And those outliers might mean that you don't use this account much, or this is a way over the dollar threshold that you post to an account. And then it recommends or reviews those transactions. So you can either have it declare that this is an outlier. And why is it an outlier? Well, these amounts are unusual. You can see it is telling me right now. You can also have it warn the user when they're entering the transaction. So when I'm entering a transaction and I go to submit it, prior to it submitting, it can tell you this is going to be an outlier transaction because of this dollar value or because of this account number, or maybe it's the department and the account combination. That way you can fix transactions as they're happening before they go through the approval process, having more valid data, more real data.
And this particular point, while this looks like sort of a cool checks and balances feature, becomes significantly important to organizations as they're growing. The more data you can feed this, the longer you're on that system, the more data you're feeding it, the richer and more it's kind of giving you back. So if you start looking right now, Eric's showing it on the general ledger side, but this technology, this machine learning, is actually going to be prevalent throughout the system as Sage builds this out into your subledgers, like your project ledger, for example. So think about that. You're in, you saw a pattern of these were all being posted to a particular project. And all of a sudden, this project that has been pretty much inactive for 6 months gets a $80,000 invoice to it. The idea of that just being flagging the controller, letting you know that this looks odd, even if it is correct, bringing it to your attention is unbelievably valuable. Well, Eric, I think we're right at time. I know we got started a bit late, but we were trying to keep this to about 45 minutes. I had one other question that came in, and I think you had touched on this I think briefly, but in terms of like automation, I think maybe talking a little bit about smart rules. It was talking about workflows and how you can set up some of those yourself.
Right. So Intacct has a few different features for the workflow automation. One of them is called Smart Rules, and one is called Smart Events, as well as others. But Smart Rules allows you to specify when somebody is breaking a rule. So, for example, if my financial fees GL account requires you to have a department, you can set up a rule to say that it has to go to the admin department, as an example. So that's one aspect. And then Smart Events says when somebody posts something, or when something gets created, then do something else. So it goes on to not just be a notification or a rule, but make some other action or another step in the workflow take place. So when somebody posts a transaction that is to my bank fees, email me and let me know, or update some other record to record that transaction. You can think of through how many different scenarios that would be that can be important. Like when somebody posts a timesheet, include the number of hours that have been worked in your statistics. When somebody hits my job, make sure that project manager gets notified. So you can set up steps in workflows that can take place and notify people that need to be notified, or make changes into the system, make additional, track additional information into the system.
Great. All right. Well, I think that brings us right to the end of the session here today. I wanted to just thank everybody very much for the attendance. We had a lot of good questions. If questions do come up, feel free to shoot me an email, or any of your account managers, Jeff, John. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. And what really most of our customers are doing these days are they've used this to generate a little bit of interest, and then we're happy to take a deeper dive and see if it is the appropriate time to evaluate this for your organization. So with that, I just want to wish everybody a great day. And again, thank you for your attendance today.
Thank you. All right.